Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're going back to the very first episode, Emissary, and recapping both that episode and our response to it way back when. And before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, we're a good time, and now we are totally into uncharted territory to a certain extent. There is no show really that that we've just watched or anything like that. We're just kind of off the cuff here. So, as David said, tonight we are going to be taking a look back, not just at the first episode of Deep Space Nine, but also our first episode of our podcast. Just kind of going over things a little bit, just to see if our opinions or anything has changed, if we've come to appreciate something more from the beginning versus now, or anything along those lines, and just kind of going from there. So. Since we don't have to do any kind of recap or anything like that, or summary of an episode is going to give us an extra amount of time to go over a lot of things. So I'm actually looking forward to that. But as always, before we jump into those things, we do like to give ourselves a weekly recap of what we've been up to. And so, David, how has your week been?
Oh, wow. It's been a busy one. So yesterday was my last day at work. It was the final day. Um, I had been sent up to our Cedar Park location for the last few days, and basically was there as it wound down, which is crazy because that's the same store I went to go interview at when I first started here at this company. So small world.
So wait, just to make sure I'm understanding, this wasn't your last day at like a particular location. You mean like with the company entirely? This was your last day.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yesterday was the last day, which I've been waiting for and expecting for some time now. So wasn't surprising in that sense, and I'd been expecting it, but that's finally here. Um, on the flip side, that means that the certification course I've been taking, I need to finish that, and my initial hopes was to finish that, weeks ago, and then realized, oh no, and the amount of time I have and the amount of work I need to do is going to push it out to the end of the month. And at this point, it's going to push me into next month, which is fine. It's just the Texas law part that I started basically today is going to take some time. It's a whole extra 3 units on top of just everything else. And I mean, now that I have free time, that means I'll have all the time I need to finish it over the next week, and then schedule the exam, etc. But at this point, I'm kind of exhausted on this blasted course. I've been doing it for a week and a half, basically constantly. Any free time I have, I've been doing this course. And I'm also at the point where I'm frustrated with the course because there have been multiple times now where I go to take a quiz, quiz myself on the knowledge I've gotten, and it's in the quiz that knowledge is revealed to me. Like the question is asking about something that I was not clearly communicated in the coursework, and it's like I have to get quizzed on it to know that I need to know that information, which is frustrating, very frustrating, because it means that I don't have a good sense of what my knowledge is versus what I should know. How much can I understand of the course material versus how much is absent because it's just not well put together. And it's becoming more of a problem the further into it I get. Like I'm in the end game now, the final stretch, and I'm at this point. Like last night I failed a quiz, and maybe I missed some of those questions for good reasons, but there were multiple times. There was one today I redid the quiz, and it was like the answer was wrong.
Mm.
It was just straight up wrong. It was so anyway. I mean, it's like, how do I know I'm doing a good job if I can't trust that the quizzes and the course material are keeping me, informed in the way that I should be. So yeah, I'm just like, I'm just kind of exhausted with it because it's been constant. It's frustrating to feel like you're not doing a good job when it's like, well,
Mm.
I don't know if it's my fault or it's the course material's fault, but at this point, I need to just buckle down. Hopefully, by this time next week, I'll have finished the course. Hopefully, maybe even taken the exam. But at this point, I'm wondering if I should schedule it for Friday of this upcoming week or for Monday of next week, so that I can give myself the weekend to just just study, 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 and make sure I have it all pat. But anyway, yeah, that's been we basically. Work is done. Working on the next thing. Not giving myself a lot of time to do much else, which, whatever. Went to back to church for the first time in 4 months because I had taken off from church in order to be at work on Sundays, which meant I could study during the week, which was good, but it also means that it was nice to go see friends I hadn't seen in a while. So yeah, long, long week for me, it turns out. And we were off last week. We took a break last.
Yeah.
That was really 2 weeks in a row of just constant, like all of that, just being constant. Oh, and I guess also just I'll just say that the Charlie Kirk killing definitely has been on my mind this whole time. It's been now 2.5 weeks since that happened. It still blows my mind that it even happened, and I just it's that's affected me too. So, but yeah, anyway, that's all a downer for me. Nothing real positive to talk about on my end. How about you? I hope you.
Well, things have been pretty steady here. I actually was able to convince my sister and brother-in-law to join me in the gym, so I've been taking them to the gym now. We're a week in, a
Nice.
week strong, um, and they've already missed a day, of course, but it's okay. We've settled on a going 3 times a week with an option for a 4th day, but the 4th day, regardless of whether or not we actually go to the gym,
Mhm.
is always going to be a very light day. It's like walking, stretching, do this that would be the day that you would do the sauna or the whirlpool or whatever, that kind of stuff. More
Right.
of a recovery day, but still getting yourself moving. So that's been interesting. I feel like I am um, more successful in the gym when I have people with me because th- it gives me something else to focus on. Like I can get in and do my workout. Don't get me wrong, I can do it by myself.
Right.
But there's just something about being in more of a group dynamic in doing things that for me it works better. And maybe it's just because all my life, all the lifting I ever did was a part of a team. So I've it's only now as an adult really that I'm ever really having to lift by myself. Before, again, it was always my teammates, my group, my whatever. Like we would always go and lift together. So um, I'm enjoying having that dynamic back, but there also is the drawback of the fact that, again, I've been doing this for several years. They never have. So I'm trying to show them how to do things, and it's like doing it from a perspective of keeping them safe because people, especially if you don't have any experience in the gym, people tend to go in and just start doing things because they saw it in a movie or they looked something up a few times before they came in and they think that they understand the mechanics of how it works in their body and everything like that. But it's if there's one thing I've learned in my years of doing this and my years of watching people doing this and my years of instructing people on how to do it, everybody's body is different, and just because you saw person A hold the bar a certain way, that may not be the way you need to hold it, and it might not be the way that you need to move with that weight. So I find it very important, especially in those early, if you can, go with someone who's been to the gym a lot that can help you out and make adjustments for you so you can learn your body positioning. So that's what we're spending a lot of time on in these early days. And again, while I enjoy doing that, the drawback is it takes me longer to do my actual workout. So a little frustrating, but not bad. I can handle it. I can handle
Right.
it. I am also exploring some stuff when it comes to schooling for my kid. Um, with the way that things are changing with the schools and public school access to things and this whole private school, charter school, all the stuff that's going on right now in our state, it's becoming very obvious to me that supplementary learning is going to be important. So
Mhm.
in addition to her going to school, I'm enrolling her in a couple of things to where it's like, an additional 2 to 3 days a week, she'll get an extra hour of instruction on a subject or two. Nothing major, nothing hopefully that would be overwhelming to her in any regard, but it's kind of just, I feel like it's a good way to shore up any failings in our education system that we've got going on right now. So,
Okay.
um, and it's interesting because I get to take her through stuff myself. I can see what she already knows versus what I feel like she needs to learn. We're really focusing on, math and science because I feel like, with again, the way the world is, the way technology is working, and everything else, those are going to be very key in the future of, just being able to understand the world that you're in. So I'm trying to make sure that she's ahead in that. But yeah, that's kind of been my focus, those two things. I've decided to take a break from the news. I feel like it's just been nonstop terrible thing after terrible thing after terrible thing. And I mean, I guess depending on who you are, where you are, what you view, it could almost seem like it's always been that way. The way the media sensationalizes one story over another and all that, and what's true, what's misinformation, you know, what's political, what's not is and you have to wonder about all that when you're looking at all of these stories. And even today, I took my daughter out for brunch this morning, and we had barely sat down before we were hearing all the, "Oh my gosh, oh, this just happened," and when the TVs are up and everything, and it's flashing across the screen, developing story, and someone set a fire in a church and shot some people, and I was just like, I mean, I don't know if this is selfish, a selfish thought or not, but I remember distinctly my first thought was, I just sat down. Like we left home and everything was fine. And in the 20 minutes it took me to leave home and get here, some other terrible thing has happened.
Right.
And then it was just like we're watching it, and then they're talking about the other um church shooting that happened a couple days ago that I didn't know about. And it's like it's so weird to be like, it happens so much that you can literally miss them, and you don't, until you catch that one, and you're like, oh, and don't forget this one happened 3 days ago, and this one was 5 days ago, and this one was 2 weeks ago, and this, and I'm like, well, I mean, geez, and so it's just all of that, and I was like, that's it, I'm done. I don't want to, I just, for a little bit, I don't want to hear about any of it.
Right.
So we are now focused on education and some entertainment here in my household, at
Right.
least for the next week or so, because I can't do it, you know.
Right.
And I don't know if I'm the only one. I don't know how other people feel about that. I don't know if other people do that as well. Just kind of have a time where you just want to just turn it off and do something different. But that's where I am right now. So we're just gonna leave it at
Cool.
that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Did you hear about this stuff that was going on this morning?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
See, it's just so much. It's
Yeah.
just so much. So
I have
I,
to say the one thing I do think about when I hear about all that stuff is that we live in a time where we have 24/7 news, and we can everything is local now because we have the news all the time. So, I mean, when's the last thing something terrible happened in Austin? I mean, there was that guy who was going around bombing people, but that was years ago at this point. Like, things in
Wait,
Austin are
which one? Which, because I mean, like we had the. Are you talking about the guy who was
the
putting stuff in the mail?
I think that was him, right? Was there was some kid that was doing it, and he got finally, like, basically the police caught up with him and killed him.
Well, I don't
That was
know.
like during the pandemic, right?
I don't know if they ever caught that guy. I thought there was, because I thought there were two, and there was the one where the person was sending things legit through the mail, and they were seemingly random packages. And then there was the other one who was kind of like, I guess, copycatting, but he was doing it in a specific area, and he was personally dropping the stuff off, and that's how they caught him, because it was all,
Right.
direct, I guess. Like
Right.
he was, he would make them and take them, whereas the other person was making them and shipping them, and it was going
Right.
through the mail distribution system
I don't
and
remember there
everything
being two
else.
people. I remember the one guy at least, and that it was someone that like they were following it. There was like a sort of police chase, and he ended up dying in it. My point is that it seems like because we live in a time where everything can feel so immediate, like they can tell you, oh my gosh, over in Michigan there was some church that got shot up, but like when's the last thing anything bad ever happened in that town? Like never, you know. But because they are always being told, it feels like they're back to back to back to back, and they are in that sense. But um, they're still spread out over a large area. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's easy to feel constant about all of it, and it is constant on some level, but on another level, maybe it's not. I don't know.
I just,
I'm just talking at this point.
yeah, just on that, I would just say, you, this kind of goes into what we were actually reading, which we'll get to at another point. But it's that, you know, identifying with a place over, like a nation or whatever, and how specific we want to get with that, and so
The
yeah.
patriotism versus nationalism chapter.
Yes,
Ah,
yes,
it's a good
and
chapter.
and I was thinking about that, like the number of times I
We're
heard
talking about the
people.
expansion philosophy for everyone who's listening.
Yes,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
and we're
we'll
gonna
get
get
to that.
there.
Yeah,
Yes, but just really quick, because there's the one thing I remember, and I was thinking about it when I read it, and I was gonna say something to you, but it was, when I was growing up, that was one of those things that we used to do all the time as an identifier was, I'm from whatever city, or I'm from whatever, like you don't, and it was like some kind of weird threat. You don't do those things around, people from, Chicago or Boston or Detroit or whatever the city was that they shouted out. And so, it's kind of the same thing here. It's like, so do we have, um, is it only a state level problem, or do we have a nationwide problem?
right,
And it's kind of like that's how the news highlights things. It's easy to be like, oh well, yeah, it's not that big of a deal because that doesn't happen around here. But the fact is, it does, in the sense that it's all a part of our nation. And
right,
so just because it's Michigan one week, and Uvalde, Texas the next week, and then it's Wyoming, and then California, and then whatever, it's still a problem. So it just kind of depends on how you want to look at things. But
right, right.
we'll get more into that when we actually get to this book. So I
Yeah,
keeping it on hand. But we're not here to talk about that tonight. We are here to talk about, our first
emissary.
impressions of The Emissary.
Yeah,
So I'm going to direct us immediately to the best, well, not the best scene, but one of them, which is the showdown between Picard
Jean-Luc Picard.
and Cisco.
Yeah,
It's easily the most identifiable scene of this pilot episode. There's a lot that goes on in this scene that's really only, I think, 4 minutes. It's not very long, at all, but the way it's filmed, the dynamic between the two, actors and their characters is remarkable. I don't know that it's ever been something that the two of them have actually sat down and talked about, which would be really interesting if that ever happened. And in fact, I intend to look up. There was a, series that, um, man, William Shatner, that he did, and it was called The Captains. And he went around and he interviewed all of the various captains
oh, right.
who had been captains at that time. Obviously, certain shows weren't in existence yet, so he didn't do those. But um, I don't know if there's ever a part in there where they ask Patrick Stewart and Avery Brooks respectively about that scene. I don't know that there's ever been a time, even at a convention, where the two of them have talked about that scene. I get the distinct impression that there's nothing there, that it's just never happened. That the two men have never been sat beside each other, and people ask them questions in particular about that, which again is crazy to me,
Yeah,
that these two we never got to hear their perspective on doing this,
yeah.
because it's such a wonderful scene for them.
Well, and it's the only. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it the only two? Well, I mean, Cisco's not yet a captain, but the only two contemporary captains that meet like that, like Janeway, does she ever meet Picard in any way, or Cisco
So
even, or
so Janeway never meets with Cisco. She does have a cameo in the Star Trek Nemesis movie where she's giving Picard his marching orders because at that time she's been promoted to admiral, and so
And
she's
he's still a
telling him
captain.
yes, and he's
Interesting.
still a captain. So there's reasons. There's
Okay.
reasons.
Okay.
So yeah, and then of course Picard meets with James T. Kirk in the Nexus in the Star Trek Generations movie.
True. True.
Um, but that's it. And then, well, there is the episode of uh, Deep Space Nine where Cisco goes back in time and meets Kirk. But obviously, that's a lot of green screening, CGIing, and whatever else. There's never like the actual them doing any kind of meeting, you know.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, those two are the only two that, as contemporary leaders of their respective shows, franchises, so forth, meet in real time. They're both active, serving on whatever and doing things. In fact, again, because of the overlap between Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, um, Next Gen was still on.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting fact that we never see them do anything else again on screen, and we never see them talk about it either. We never see Patrick and Avery talk
I
about it.
know we've talked about it multiple times, and rewatching, re-listening to our first episode, we talked about it even then. But the fact that we don't get more between them is just a shame.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, that scene is so great. I mean, as you said, I said it in that original episode of what you'd said to me. To you, Cisco is Batman and Picard is Superman, and
Hmm.
I totally agree with that in the sense of like the just the way the two are treated. Picard is this kind of bigger than life character. He's
Yeah, he's almost otherworldly, coming down to our level,
right,
to deal with us.
right.
And Cisco, born from the darkness of the trenches,
Yes, he has a
and coming out
tragedy
of it.
just like Batman does.
Yeah,
Picard's tragedy is what? That he's been promoted to the biggest, best ship in the frickin' fleet? Like, come
but
on.
yeah, Picard's tragedies are all external.
Yeah.
It's
He can't
up to
choose
a certain
between
point,
geology and being a captain, and he does choose. Like,
right? Yeah, his struggles, that he later and he chooses to internalize are personal ones that are brought to him. They're not things that actually happen to him, which is
right,
an interesting distinction. Like even with the whole Borg assimilation thing, that was a result of his chosen career path, a
right,
chosen risk that he had accepted when he became a captain of Starfleet.
right,
Versus something that's inflicted upon him.
right.
So yeah, there's a huge difference there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, just to put a fine point on it, Picard doesn't experience any losses from that being Borgified as like Cisco does. Cisco loses something. Picard, we're back to basics by the end of that episode, that
So,
3-part episode arc, basically.
and I'm so glad you brought that up because that is something that I have felt like they've tried to retcon in latter years, was that there is this something
Lingering.
about Picard that is forever affected, forever lost because of what happened to him. Because I do feel like when you watch the episodes where he is captured and assimilated and Wolf 359 and all that stuff and then restored to himself, we are supposed to take it as he's over it. you know we do see briefly when he goes home and he has this breakdown with his brother that he's still affected or whatever, but even then we're supposed to feel like after that situation he's over it,
Right.
and he is restored to himself. And I think that especially as Wolf 359 became kind of this fixed focal point in Star Trek and the way that it shaped characters like Cisco and later we see other characters, Captain Shaw and so forth. I think that it became one of those things they were like, we need to do more with this with Picard. We need to put this into, more of a darker context for him because again, he's otherwise unblemished,
Yeah.
and when we see him in First Contact and he's still having dreams about the Borg, and then we see later on in Picard some things that are going on with him, and so I'm not going to tell you what that is because haven't watched it, but yeah, there's just a lot of it was suddenly it became important for them to give this guy um, this flaw because otherwise he's just too perfect. He's
Right.
super moral. He's deeply motivated by this sense of, honor and duty and, this regal quality to the man that is almost unshakable until you throw this Borg component
Right.
into it, which again, I always found so interesting because of the fact that we have the Borg Queen. Who better to serve as companion to the Borg Queen than this guy who seems born to rule, to lead, Jean-Luc
Yeah.
Picard,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why Cisco again is a perfect shadow for him
Yeah.
in this.
Well, you know what I find interesting having rewatched that whole scene. First off, I just want to quickly comment. I love the way he says Bajor when he introduces "Welcome to Bajor." I was
Mhm.
like, no, that's quite not quite right. But then later on, with at the end of the episode, he does say Bajor. So for whatever reason, they must have shot that first scene, pretty early, and I don't know, came back later and did the other scene, and he had said it right. But I just
So,
laughed
side
because it
note,
just stands
real
out
quick,
so much.
side note about that, real quick. So, apparently, there is a rule in Star Trek that whenever they create a new alien race or new technology or whatever it is, whenever it's brand new, the first person on screen who has to say it gets to determine the
The
pronunciation
pronunciation.
from here for all time, right?
Interesting.
So that's why they say anyway that his name is Data, not Data, because the
Mm,
first person to say it was Picard, who says Data. And so from
mm,
then on he was Data. And then when it comes to this one, it was I forget who it is that says it first on Deep Space Nine, but I think it's Major Kira. I think she's the first one to say it for Deep Space Nine.
okay.
And so I think she's the first one. And
That would make
or
well,
no, it might have been Cisco when he was talking to Jake. I'll have to
well,
go back and check that. But yeah.
well. Quick question though, because when did the character of Ensign Ro appear on TNG? Because I feel like her character would have introduced the Bajorans and all that,
So
right?
that's true. She does introduce the Bajorans, but if I remember correctly, when
Which
she's
actually,
introduced,
Bajorans. No, no, it's still wrong. No, never mind. Sorry, keep going.
but because I'm pretty sure that when Ro Laren shows up, and she does say she's Bajoran, but no, she calls herself a Bajora with
Oh,
an
interesting.
just yeah, and there's no N
Huh.
on there. And so I don't know, like I don't know why they kind of went all over the place with naming of this particular race, but you're right though in that Picard seemingly corrects himself.
Right.
Maybe they're just doing a reshoot, whatever the situation was, and they were just like, by the way, it's Bajoran. We've decided it's Bajoran. That makes more sense. It's easier, whatever. And he says it in his final scene
Right.
before departing, and he kind of like solidifies it there. But yeah, we've called them everything. They've been it's Bajor, Bajor, Bajora, Bajoran. It's like y'all pick
Yeah.
someone for the love of God. Pick.
Well, I think it's interesting they ended up on Bajor because it has it has harder consonant sounds. Bajor is much more, I feel, Frenchy, which is like almost makes sense for Picard because he was supposed to be French. But I don't know,
And that might
maybe
have been why they did away with it because it was supposed to be something that it's going to sound different. Alien and Bajor versus Bajor is you know definitely different. Like you said, it's a very hard sound for the
Mhm.
two consonants there. So I could see that, but
Yeah,
like you said, it's interesting that we hear him say it differently here, and then the rest of the scene kind of evolves around all of that. So,
right.
and I even feel like even in the scene, Picard says, like, he says, "Welcome to Bajor," and then later on he says, "I've come to know the Bajorans." So it's almost like even in the scene he corrects himself
Right.
and then moves forward.
Yeah, I think you're right about that too. But anyway, all that to say, rewatching this scene, and I love how we're still on the scene because it's a great scene. But anyway, rewatching this scene, what was really interesting to me to note was that when Cisco starts like getting in Picard's face. I mean, we know that he's doing it because of Wolf 359, and Picard knows that as well. But Picard chooses to be cold. Like he starts off warm to Cisco, but his choice, like his reasoning for being cold back to Cisco, is because Cisco doesn't seem to be interested in the job. And if we know anything about Picard, is he is the
That
Federation man.
and that was something that we talked about last time as well, which
Yeah,
is that Picard, in his initial meet up with Cisco and the realization that Cisco is holding on to this animosity towards him, we see Picard falter. He's
yes,
shaken. He's suddenly confronted with this horrible memory, and it visibly shakes him. We see him. We see his face drops. He's very friendly. He's very open. He's smiling, extending his hand. He's doing all the things that makes you like Picard. He's very warm. He's very open. And then when Cisco drops that Wolf 359 on him, it all goes away. His face
yeah,
drops. He kind of sinks into himself. But then what's the one thing Picard has always relied on to, recover his
yes,
foundation?
yes,
Duty,
yep,
honor. You are a Starfleet officer. You have rules, and also there is a hierarchical structure he can work off of. I am the captain. You are the commander.
right,
I have a sense of myself again, and
right,
he does. He becomes very hard after that.
right.
So
Yeah. Well, it's also great because we get those moments before Cisco shows up in Picard. Well, it's not the ready room, but the conference room, where Picard has called for you. He wants you to come visit him on the Enterprise. He's like got all of these problems to deal with, and Picard wants to give him like
because once again, this kind of shows the privilege that Picard is used to enjoying. When
yes,
someone hears that the captain of the Federation flagship, and not just the captain of the Federation flagship, but Jean-Luc Picard himself
yes,
is calling for you, in most cases, think about it. Anytime anybody came onto the Enterprise, they were eager to go to that meeting and to
right,
sit in the ready room and everything else. Cisco is like, man, whatever.
right.
I'll
I'll
get
get
to
there when
you
I
when
get
I
there.
right. I'll get to
Yeah,
you when I get to you. These things are more important. I'll get to you when and based upon who Picard is, and the number of times we've seen him do it, there's a part of him that's bristling a little bit that this commander is rebuffing his official summons.
right.
It's not an order, but it's a courtesy, but we're getting close to it becoming an order
Yeah.
because you should have already shown up,
Right.
you know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I got better things to do. I need to take my ship and get out of here from this dinky little space station is kind of how it feels. Um and the way that Cisco what I'm trying to say. Cisco is of course annoyed. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. The only people that Picard seems to not get along with is always the admirals. So the fact that it's a
Mhm.
subordinate, you're right, that he's a commander. I'll just say it again. I wish that he had started off as a captain, Cisco. I feel like if you're going to be managing a space station, you should have at least a captain's rank, even an admiral's rank. But still, the scene is so great. It was such a bold choice, such a great choice to have our main character interact with the main character of the big show, the series that was in the middle of its heyday, and him basically be like, "I don't like you." It's such a great choice
So
to have Cisco do that.
So I'm going to defend them making Cisco a commander, only because I've had some time to think about it. Because I felt like you for a very long time. Like it always bothered me that they did not start him out as a captain. Everybody else, whenever we saw these, has always been a captain. Why would they? Why would they do this? Um, but the reason why I want to defend it now is in looking back and seeing how the scene plays out. If you think about it, it couldn't have worked any other way because Cisco is insubordinate, but if he had been a captain, Picard wouldn't have been able to dismiss him. He
Right.
wouldn't have been able to get away from him. If Cisco had charged on and said what he said, he actually as a captain, he would have been able to say a great deal more, you
Sure.
know. because now they're contemporaries. No one supersedes the other.
Right.
But Cisco, because he is a commander, he there is a certain leeway that he gets, but you can see him bristling. You can see that there's more to this than he knows he can give out. And so
Right.
he's towing a line for sure, but it's that kind of contained rage that makes Cisco all the more compelling in the episode. If
Right.
he had just been able to air whatever his grievance was with Picard, while it would have made for a great explosive scene, I don't think that it would have worked out long term for us to watch him have to again wrestle with his internalized pain
Right.
and moving through it. And again, that scene ends with Cisco being dismissed by Picard, that, nearly whispered, dismissed that Picard levels at him, So, and of course, it's been debated, and people are, he's so disrespectful. That was so rude. Because again, it's the love of Picard, and
Right.
people. It's so funny to me how people will, they want to jump on that. He's supposed to check his feelings at the door. And I'm like, do you not understand what the man is going through? Like,
Right.
he lost his wife, he lost his home, all of this, and this is the face of the person that brought that hurt to his life.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, and he's trying to move on with his life. He's trying to obviously be better. He's put himself back out for, active duty roles again. And the first assignment he takes after 3 years at the Utopia Policia
Dockyards.
shipyards, working
Dockyards.
and
Yeah.
all this stuff, the first person he has to meet and convince and go through is again the face of the pain. And I'm like,
Right.
come on.
Yeah. No, I totally agree that for story reasons, it makes sense he's a commander in the sense of like it helps set up the whole, meeting with the prophets and why are you here? You keep coming back to this moment. I totally get that. I'm just saying that in universe, I feel like maybe it should be a higher. But I'm trying to think of okay, what's a good reason for why he's a commander? And maybe it's because this is a Bajoran space station. It's around Bajor, but Bajor is not yet part of the Federation. That maybe that's not it's considered inappropriate to put someone too high up. Maybe that makes sense, like we don't want to offend these allies. They're not officially a part of our organization yet. We're just here to administer the station. So we're not putting a guy here who's too heavily up the chain in Federation command. He doesn't get to, Cisco can't order ships around as a captain or admiral. All he can do is coordinate Bajoran efforts with the Federation.
Hmm.
And so that's why he starts as a commander. I just, those are the things that I think about with storytelling. Like, why is this the way it is? And does it make sense? And I
And I
like,
would
as I
also
think it out, I think that actually makes a lot of sense now that I think about it.
And I would also argue that I don't believe that they thought of this as a long-term position. I don't think that this was him going there and they thought, oh, well, you're going to be here for the next 7 years. I really feel like this was think of the state of this station that we see it in when he first arrives. It's
Yeah.
complete chaos and disarray. It's not, and again, the Bajoran people are already on the cusp of Federation membership. So
Right.
they're looking for somebody to come in and kind of do that fixer upper work. But again, it's not supposed to take a long time. We
Right.
want you to fix the station. We want you to bring these people up to code. We want you to get them ready for membership. And then once that happens, everything's gonna change. We're gonna take over. So you're not gonna be here long,
Right.
you know? And yeah, I don't feel like this. I think that's another thing that people may overlook because it's not stated. They don't say, oh, this is a 6 month assignment, this is a year assignment, anything like that. It's like, here's the job, and and like Picard says, short of violating the Prime Directive, you're to get these people ready for Federation membership. And so it's just like, we know there's an implied timetable here. We just don't know what it is,
Right.
you know, and
Yeah.
we've never seen what it takes to get um, a population ready for Federation membership. So we don't know exactly
Right.
what this, but I always took it as I don't think they thought of this as a long term assignment. I think they were thinking this is a year, 2 years tops, and then you're out. And he's already saying he was investigating civilian service. So again, to me, it's like there's a lot of indicators here that he was not supposed to be here for a long time.
Right.
He's already been investigating civilian service. Someone else besides Picard has to know that. But
Right.
and he had to have started that before he even got shipped out there. I'm
Exactly.
thinking they were like, look, we'll try to find you a spot, but in the meantime, go out here, clean this place up, and by the time you've got everything fixed, we will have found a cushy civilian spot for you to come back to, and we'll go from there.
Right.
You know, and then he drops that bomb on Picard because why would Picard know that he's investigating civilian service?
Right.
Starfleet wouldn't have told them. They were like, "Hey, we're." All he probably would have known is, "Hey, we're sending Commander Cisco out there. Like,
Right.
you're in the area. You know the Bajoran people. Give them a quick lay of the land, and you're off to whatever." You
Yeah.
know,
Off to the races. Yeah.
you're right, and that's why Picard says what he says to him. Oh, I didn't know that. I'll look into it. Sounds like Starfleet should be looking for somebody else anyway, so I'll look into it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's I think something else that we should consider too. I don't think this was a long term position for anybody in those
Right.
initial stages, but
Okay.
certainly not him either.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's a great scene. Glad
Yeah.
to see it again.
Yeah.
It's just so fun to go back and watch all of our characters in their, you know,
Early stages,
yeah.
yes.
Speaking of
Uh,
which, the prosthetics on Odo and Quark, man. Odo doesn't look orange, he just looks old. It's not a waxy look, it's more like old age prosthetics almost
yeah,
on Renee.
it's very clear that they didn't know what they wanted to do with his character yet.
Right,
They had an idea because you can kind of see it around the eyes a little bit, but the rest of it, no clue.
right,
And I don't know when that change really occurred, when the idea formally solidified. But well, obviously, you watch the show, you can see where the makeup gets exponentially better. Now, when it comes to Quark, if I remember correctly, his it's the nose that changes. So the nose that we see him use in the pilot is not one that they use later on because it gets lost, misplaced, something like that happens to it.
right,
And so they had to design a new one on the fly. And so the one we see in later episodes is the one that they obviously stick with. But that very first one, they end up losing. And if I'm not mistaken, also that first one was one he had used years earlier when he played one of the Ferengi in Next Generation. So
right,
yeah, Armin Shimmerman has been our Ferengi. He was one of the first to be in the Ferengi makeup. They've constantly used him as a reference. He is the Ferengi for
right.
us,
Yeah.
which also doesn't make sense that he doesn't become Grand Nagus at the end. But
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, big mistake there. Um, the introduction of Bashir is, as we remember, he comes off with Dax and is super awkward about like, you want to go join me for drinks, and she basically says yes.
she
But
does say yes.
it's
She
just so
does say yes.
interesting to see him because, as you point out, he's 27, she's 28, as she says, and it's just funny because the idea that this character turns out to be some sort of super genius in the end. Like in this opening episode, he's just a young doctor. They had no, weird arc for that part of this character yet. That was
You know,
much later.
I wonder if we can ever, if it's ever been proven that for a lot of these shows, I feel like they just had a basic outline for characters. And they're like, don't worry about it. We'll fill in the rest as the show goes on. As we
Yep.
see dynamics, as we see actors and performances and whatever else, we're going to feel this out. And we don't really get any inkling that they know what they're doing with a lot of these characters until much later, like a season, into season 4 and so forth, which would explain why characters like Dax, Bashir, seem to be woefully underdeveloped for those first couple of seasons. There's such
Uh,
an intense focus and fascination on characters like Cisco, Kira, Odo, Quark, even that Bashir and Dax kind of take a back seat for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's season 4, and we still don't really know much about Dr. Bashir or Jadzia Dax or
right.
whatever it is. And It's interesting because I don't feel like they do that anymore. A lot of the shows that we have in Trek now, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks. I feel like those characters were well thought out, very well planned out. They knew what they wanted long before they even started filming. Now, I'm going to give Strange New Worlds gets a little asterisk beside it because so many of their characters are, characters that we've known since the '60s. So
Literally
you
since the
already,
beginning,
yeah, you had a pretty solid foundation.
their
Christopher
character
Pike,
arc.
Spock,
Yeah,
Christine Chapel. Yeah, there's very little wiggle room in what you can do with some of those characters. So that's not fair. But yeah,
right,
your newer ones, I feel like they have done a great job. Discovery, they knew what a lot of those characters were about long before they started filming. And maybe that is um, why some of those shows struggled because we suddenly were bombarded with information. We didn't get a chance to go along with any kind of character journey or whatever. They told us so much right away.
right,
And like we've lamented many, many times that we didn't really get to know Jadzia Dax until so much later, and then she dies,
right.
you know, versus Saru, for example, in Discovery, where I feel like episode one is just like, you know, family history, the DNA history of his planet, his culture, his people, like all these things. I'm like, the show's only an hour long, man. You're gonna give me some other character information.
Right.
So yeah, interesting the way that they've done that we don't see done here. And then, like you were saying, Julian Bashir being annoying from day one. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Of course, I think the one of the major standouts of this episode, well, I mean, obvious, is Major Kira, but also not just Major Kira, but the fact that like the station does so much in this episode with the whole we're moving it out of orbit to near the wormhole. By the way, for the rest of the show, are we saying that that's where where it ended up at the end of this episode is where it is for the rest of the show? It
Yes.
doesn't return back to whatever orbit
No.
it was in before. Okay,
No. Stays
got
there.
it.
So
Okay,
just to be clear on that, the station originally was in orbit around Bajor. It was an ore processing facility. They would bring the ore up from Bajor where it was, melted down, stripped of all the impurities and whatever else, then loaded up on the cargo ships where it was shipped out. So of course it makes sense for it to be in orbit of the planet because the minerals and stuff were coming from the planet. Now, once they, well, obviously once the Federation takes over and everything like that, that ore processing is cut out. They don't do that because it was slave labor that
right,
the Cardassians were using to do that. And
right,
then, of course, when they moved the station closer to the wormhole, that made attempts to go back and forth to the planet unrealistic because now the planet is a good distance away. Like I'm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they said when they moved it that under normal circumstances, moving the station, it was going to take them like 2 or 3 days to get the
right.
station into position. And then, of course, they Technobabble magicked a way to do it in like 20
Yeah.
minutes or something.
O'Brien basically says, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead."
Yeah.
Just
You
does
know,
it.
two
I love
days,
it.
I can do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I love how the computer tells him, that command was ignored because it violated protocols. And he's like, "I didn't ask for your opinion."
Protocol, those are guidelines. I don't know what you're talking about.
And then they all do all right, touch the buttons real fast with your fingers flying and make it look like you were doing something important. And he makes it happen.
We're going to yell out orders. We're going to give you a little shaky, and
Yeah.
then boom, we're off to the races, and we'll be there in 10 minutes.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
how he was just a humble transportation room 3 guy, and now he's doing all kinds of stuff.
Now he's chief engineer, chief of operations.
Yeah, and like you said in our original episode, that send off of Picard, sending him off was a great scene where Picard says, "I called down here to this room asking for you when I'd forgotten," and he says, "Oh, this is just transporter room 3," and Picard doesn't say anything; he just nods, but with a smile, and then sends him off. And he says to Picard, the guy on the platform says energize, and he says energize to the captain. Great little moment.
Yeah.
The flip opposite of Cisco's scene with him, but um, really works
Well, they
to
were gonna
get.
have they were gonna have to give us a nice one. I think that was just um yeah, we have to end on a somewhat positive note with
Right.
Picard. And since we're not going to see him again, he doesn't we like as we talked about before in our previous episode, it would have been nice if like when Cisco kind of comes around to things,
Hmm.
he meets with Picard one more time and kind of not necessarily forgiving him, but just kind of alluding to the fact that, he's moving on. He's focused on the work at least. Don't
Right.
talk about um reassignment. I'm here. We're good. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, they have that scene at the end. Yeah, that's a great scene, too, because that is one of the last scenes of the episode where that's what Cisco says, and Picard is basically, oh, like, oh, okay, all right, you're up in my book again, basically. Um, but yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of what else. Like the fact that so much action happens in this episode, I think is surprising. Obviously they spent a lot on the special effects for this
Yeah.
episode, and it really shows because I mean the space station moves. You got a set that they're like throwing like a bunch of metal pieces around. It's a whole new set, obviously. They really
It's a
spent.
huge whole new set. I love
Yes,
we talked about this before when they built that promenade set. It was the largest set ever constructed on the Paramount lot. They used to take other people, CEOs, executive producers, bigwigs and stuff. They used to take them on tours of the set like it was a freaking, carnival attraction or something, because it was so big and uh, so well constructed. It was almost like a lived in set the way that they did everything. So, yeah, they used to really enjoy taking people through there. And then in this episode, not only do we get to see the promenade and all that, but we also have scenes of the Enterprise. We've got the bridge, we've got Transporter Room 3, we've got various corridors, we've got the captain's. Well, no, he's not in the captain's ready room. We just,
the
you know,
conference room. Yeah,
yeah. We got the conference room, like all these sets had to be available. So at one point, if you think about it, on Paramount, there was just a huge section that was nothing but Star Trek,
right.
you know? Um, that must have been like a nerd's dream. Like, imagine like it's all enclosed and then you're working on it. So you're walking from one set to the next. And because they've got everything connected, you never set foot outside.
Right.
So it's almost like you're walking through the various quarters. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Unless you were claustrophobic, then probably terrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, huge sets, huge sets. I would love to have seen that in its heyday, but nothing like I don't think they've ever constructed anything like that since. So
Right.
I wonder what it would take for them to build it again. Like if they wanted to just now be like, we're gonna do a Deep Space Nine movie for some reason. So they gotta, redo the whole station.
Right.
What that would take.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, we haven't read the autobiography, and you're still reading the comic books, so I wonder what stories would be possible if we came back. Um,
you know, and this is something I don't know if we've ever talked about this in our entire run of our show, period. I would love for them to do something where they, did go back to like the props themselves, but it was a totally new cast. Like the Enterprise D, and it's now a training ship. So you got an all
mm,
new crew on there that's training on the Enterprise.
right.
Or again, Deep Space Nine, but it's a all new because it's a living station. People
Right.
get promoted, die, move on for whatever reason, retire.
Right.
So obviously people would be replaced. And just to go to Deep Space Nine and you're like, and let's say that you're a person who, you lived through the Dominion War, you knew all about, Cisco and Kira and all those guys, and you find out that you're getting put on Deep Space Nine, and you can't wait to shake hands with Colonel Kira and to work with Julian Bashir and all these things, and you step onto the station and you go like a kid, you're running around looking for these people, and there's random Dr. A in there and Captain so and so in the office, and
Hmm.
you're just like, Who are these people? Where's Kira? Where's Dax? Where's Worf? Like,
Right.
what's going on here? It's like, yeah, they haven't lived here in like 10 years. Like, I need you to chill. You know, you're fanboying out over people who like never knew you existed and never will. So
Right.
like, get to know these new guys. You know.
Right. Um. Oh, real quickly, J.G. Hertzler appears in this episode
Yes, he does.
as the captain of Cisco's ship at the beginning. The what was it?
The Saratoga. He is the
Yeah.
Vulcan captain of the Saratoga. So
I remember every time I went to go look up his name whenever we would do episodes here in the later seasons, there would be times when it mentions that in the first episode he appeared. And I remember partway through this episode being like, "Wait a minute, I know he appears somewhere, or there's something about this character on the station or on the ship that Cisco's on," and then remembering that it was him. And you can tell it's him if you recognize his voice.
yeah, the voice is a dead giveaway. Like
Yes.
it's one of those things where like I can remember when I first watched the show, and it didn't register for me. It's like, okay, random Vulcanate, right? But
Right.
then of course the show goes on later on, and he comes back as Martok, and I heard him again, and remember I'm like, I know I've heard that voice before. And it wasn't until years later, once streaming becomes a thing and you're able to, that you get to watch it again.
Right.
And again, I heard it and I was like, that's JG. So I'm looking for Martok. And I'm like, where, whatever. And then it's like, oh, it's him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the voice is distinctive.
Yeah, he does have this great voice, which was, I mean, I'm glad they made him a Klingon because he does a
Oh, it
great job
fits.
as
Yeah.
Martok. Um, I wonder what his his Vulcan version, what a Vulcan character played by him would look like. But yeah, his Klingon character is fantastic. Um, Trying to think of what else. We had Nog. You know, Nog starts off in a bad place, starts off as a
hmm
little thief, and um, I'm glad
Has
his he is
one
one of
of
the
the
best
greatest
arcs.
character arcs in
100%.
Trek history. I
Yeah,
don't think there are many who could top him.
right.
So
Yeah. Um, what
we
else
don't we'll
happens?
and we're gonna obviously we can get to Nog later on, but like again for the focus of this particular episode, um I I always since you've watched it now, and now you've watched it twice because you watched it obviously before we did tonight's episode. Um, who are your standouts? Like, are the same people that were standouts for you the first time that you watched the episode? Now here we are. What is it? 3 years later, 4 years later, and you're watching it again. Are they the same standouts, or are you notice anything new about characters that gives you a different kind of appreciation?
Yeah. Kira was the best character in season one, hands down. Um, because her character is the one who's having to deal with all of the consequences of the Cardassian occupation and left. And she starts off this episode just as Cisco is upset with Picard. Kira is upset with Cisco for showing up, and she has good reason. She says, 60 years ago, the Cardassians said they were coming to help and stayed for 60 years and abused us. And here we just invited the Federation to do the same thing. The provincial government isn't going to last, and they're the ones who asked you guys here. So you might as well leave before you get comfortable. I bet you guys don't do hard work. I bet you're not used to lifting heavy metal sheets and all that. She doesn't have anything for Cisco, and by the end, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of why she comes to like him in the sense that, I mean, Odo says he comes to
So
like Cisco because Cisco was willing to use Nog as leverage to keep Quark around, which is a fun scene when Odo says, "And I thought I wasn't gonna like him." But it's hard for me to really pinpoint like why Kira would yet
it's
be
there's a moment. There's a moment, and if you do miss it, but remember when Cisco comes onto the station and he's walking through the promenade with Bashir,
Jake.
not Bashir, but O'Brien,
Uh huh.
and it's a mess, right? And
Right.
they pass by one of the
The
Vedics, one of the
Yes,
clerics, right?
and
And the
he's
cleric's like, "Come in." He says, "Another time," and I was like, "Another time, sure." And so then in that scene you're talking about later on, where Kira is cleaning stuff up, and she's asking Cisco about getting his hands there. She's messing with him, really.
Right.
Well, during that exchange and him helping her do things, she starts to explain to him the importance of the Bajoran religion and
Right.
how it's a central, integral part of who Bajorans are.
Right.
And so she's telling him all this stuff, and he's talking about Opaka and the Kai and all this stuff. And he's getting this information from her, but she's very earnest in that scene. And then
That
they're
same Fennec
interrupted
pops
by
up.
the same Vedic, and he says it's time. So now, and then you watch as Cisco gets up and he leaves with the cleric, the look on Kira's face says it all. She's completely blown away. This outsider is being invited to something with the Vedics, right?
Right.
Doesn't know what it is, but he's being let off. And so on the
And
especially on
she
the tails of that conversation of just how important the Bajoran religion is to them
right.
and how seriously they take these things, for this guy to come in and tell Cisco it's time for you to go, to do this thing.
Right.
Yeah,
And
the look on
then
her face
and the fact
tells
he
you.
goes to visit with the Kai and he comes back with an orb. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. Those are smaller details that you could miss, but they
Yeah.
all add up to something.
And so,
Um,
and then he gets the orb, and then they get the initial discovery. He takes off to look for the celestial temple. They see it. He disappears in it. Then he comes back. And again, the last time she had talked to him, she was just telling him about how important all these things were. And
right.
suddenly he comes back with major revelations. He's now, and not only that, but he's met with the Kai. He's got an orb. He's discovered the celestial temple. He's
Right.
met the prophets.
Right.
So in the space of a couple of hours, she's went from having contempt for this guy to suddenly, holy crap, he is our connection to our gods.
Right.
So yeah, I could see why she did a complete 180 on the guy so quickly. There was no need to gradually warm her up. We didn't get to have to suffer through 2 seasons of them infighting with each other before they finally formed cohesive unit or anything like that. She
Right.
fell in step pretty quickly,
Yeah.
which I appreciate.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Definitely. I guess what's just so curious about all that is the fact that I guess it's not curious, but her character is so interesting in season one because of all the stuff that she goes through. But I don't feel like she ever gets a chance to shine like she does here when she is leading the station. There's never a moment where she is in charge like this, and she freaking bluffs her way through this Cardassian confrontation. Um, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there ever really an episode where she has a chance to take charge like that? I don't feel like she ever really does.
No, most of the time, Cisco's never far away and never gone for very long. In
Right.
fact, it's almost whenever we see her in charge, it's always very briefly. Like it'll be like the show opener, the episode opening, and she's in charge because Cisco's been away, but he shows back up right then. Like we
Right.
missed the time where she was in charge,
Right.
basically.
The only other time where she wasn't with Cisco is when the Dominion briefly takes possession of the station, and
But
then
then,
she's not given power to go with the
right, she's
Kai
not in
for a
charge
while.
either. Right. So yeah, there's she we never get to have like a prolonged, it's a full episode where it's Kira running things,
Right.
you know. Which again I think is fine. I never had a problem with it. There was never a moment where I thought that she wasn't capable
Right.
or that she couldn't follow through with um what Cisco wanted, what plan he had, which is not something you can say for other first officers like Chakotay, for example, from Voyager. Which once you start watching Voyager, I mean, I don't know how you'll take it, but for me, I always took him as very disrespectful. It was his whole. It seemed like at every opportunity where he was given direct command, it was like he couldn't wait to do the opposite of
Of
what
what?
Captain Janeway wanted. Haha, she's incapacitated. I'm gonna completely change and abandon the plan that we agreed to before she, got knocked out or whatever.
Mm,
Yeah, I
right.
just never understood that. And then it was like, well, I have to do what I think is best, but you agreed to a plan. We're more than halfway down the road of said plan, and now you want to suddenly backtrack and do something completely different. Won't work. Why? Just stay the course, dummy.
Right.
But whatever. We're not here to talk about him yet. We might do a comparison of first officers, but Dave would have to watch a lot more, a lot more
A lot
Trek
more Trek
for
ahead
that.
of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Gul Dukat showing up was a great moment because as soon as he shows up on, or as soon as they get the hail and they say someone named Gul Dukat is hailing us, she says Gul Dukat, like she says it with such ferocity and anger. It's just like he deserves all of it. Oh, he deserves all of it. After 7 seasons, he deserves every bit of her disdain. But the way he shows up and he's so cocky, and you'll have to forgive me, Commander. This was my office only 2 weeks ago. He's just great.
He's so it's smooth that goes beyond smooth to that very sinister, slimy place,
Yes, yes,
like everything he says, it's almost like the words are dripping with this menacing,
yeah. That's a great way to
feel to
say
it.
it. He's
Yeah.
smooth because he's slimy. He's just covered in this
Yeah,
sliminess.
like nothing sticks to the guy.
Yeah,
Kira can barely contain her hatred for him,
right,
and
right.
he's just like, "Meh, petty Bajorans, you
Yeah,
do nothing for me,"
yeah.
which
What
is so funny,
wormhole?
right?
Yeah,
And then, well, she says we've encountered a wormhole. There's hostile aliens inside. You might want to keep your distance. And he's like, oh, maybe they
yeah,
won't be hostile to an
uh,
enlightened species. Maybe they
yeah,
just don't like Bajorans.
yeah. And
So
we know
yeah,
you sent a Federation ambassador to go get their technology. We figure we might as yeah. It just and then it's so great too because when the other guy shows up, the other goal, and he's just angry. He's just
Goldar
where did
heel.
Goldar where did Gold Dukat go? He doesn't have that
No, I'm sorry, not
smooth.
Goldar Hero. Gully Vec.
Is
That's
that
who
it?
it is. Gully
Okay.
Vec.
He
He
doesn't
shows up.
have he doesn't have Gold Dukat sliminess. He's
No,
just
he's just all anger and bluster. This is Gully
yes,
Vec. We are taking over your station, and you will answer for your crimes of destroying
right,
one of our ships. She's like, "What are you talking about?"
right, right. Yeah. Uh that's all a fun scene. And I guess what I'm getting at with all that is that Bashir and I guess Dax has some development. We get some from her.
We
The
get her initial flashes of her backstory, her being a joined Trill, and her going from the old man to the young woman.
right.
But yeah,
I liked, and maybe I said this originally, but when you think about it, whenever Cisco first touched the orb, and he has his recollection, well, not even a recollection, when he remembers visiting his wife on the beach for the first time, he gets to interact with that moment in the moment. He is not just remembering a memory. Like Jadzia just has a memory of it. It's like she has a
yeah,
flashback of how it happened, then she's back. Cisco was able to interact with the memory and
yeah,
change it in some way, maybe which goes to explain why he would be different, why he's the emissary. He's
right.
not just seeing a memory; he's able to interact with it in some way. Which again, still some of the best lines. Your mother's gonna love me, and
It's not every day you meet the woman that you're
oh,
going to marry.
yeah,
It's
and
like,
uh,
man,
never before and never
and
again.
never again.
Yeah, like all those lines are so great. The only problem with them is like they're so smooth because he knows he's remembering what
Right,
happened.
exactly. They can only be delivered with that level of confidence because he already knows.
Right,
Like, you couldn't say that now. I mean, I guess you could, but you
right.
would come off as like
So
there's a
arrogant.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a level of sincerity to his words, and I feel like we only really get that level because we also as the audience are in on it. We
right.
know.
Right.
But if we had watched that scene and not known that Jennifer was if we had I don't think that we would have. I don't think it would have registered as well. I think we still would have been like, oh, that's a smooth line. He's got a cold delivery there, but
Right.
there would have been something missing because we didn't have that backstory.
Yeah.
But yeah, you couldn't say that now. I mean, not and it work anyway. You might get a laugh.
Well, that's
You
what
might
I'm
get a
saying
laugh.
is
Yeah.
interesting. Is like I wonder how that really went down. He probably was much more of a klutz the first time around. The whole take a lemonade probably happened just as it did the first time, but it's like as he interacts with the scene, he learns to be more, kind of to enjoy it more.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, that's what
yeah,
it is. He's enjoying this.
yeah,
It's not the nervousness of a first meet. This is the enjoyment, the confidence, the I'm getting to play with, you know, a very fun, fond thing in my past
right. And I
again.
can see my wife again at the moment
And,
when I
yeah, and I'm
first met her and all that.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, it's kind of just it was a great scene because we get to see the playful side of him. I mean, he's been kind of a serious character up to that point. Having come from that terrible, ship being destroyed, the Saratoga being destroyed, and having to explain to Jake that we're going to this new station, and then seeing all the terrible stuff that's going on, and the Kai being like, "I can't help you unless you help yourself," and like now we finally get to see the levity that the character can have, and yeah, so it makes that scene a lot of fun. And then of course it all leads into everything else with the prophets. Um, do you remember what exactly the reason is for why Jadzia sees things as pleasant, whereas Cisco immediately sees the reality of the place?
So they never really give a reason. There's never anything that says, but it's always been assumed that it's because they're trying to make a point to Cisco. The prophets are trying to make a point to him, and it's and since Jadzia is not a part of that in any way, it's almost like what they're giving her is something that it's just like we're not interested in you. So go over here, relax. You're not in any danger. You're comfortable. You're whatever. Whereas Cisco is on alert. He's standing in a very dangerous environment.
Right,
So he's expecting more things to happen than she is. But again, there's nothing that they've ever explicitly written that says this is why we did what we did. So,
right, okay,
which
all right,
I guess is enough of a storytelling device, like she's clearly not in danger, so she's not our focal point. We go where the action is, and he's standing on a very dangerous cliff face. There's lightning going on. There's all this stuff. Why is his so starkly different? There's an interesting thing that must be happening on his side that's
right,
not happening on hers.
right,
So
yeah. Um, It reminded me of the fact that at a certain point on the show, I feel like it was around season 5. Basically, once the Dominion has kind of permanently ended up on our side of the wormhole, that we never go back through the wormhole again. Like there were a lot of the early seasons that are going through the wormhole to explore the Gamma Quadrant and meet other civilizations, yada yada yada. And then there's the war, the Dominion War, and like they just don't go through it anymore, which is fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it really just stood out having rewatched this opening episode where that was a
well,
part of it.
because the Dominion becomes such an incredibly hostile threat on the other side of the wormhole. It was basically like you're asking for trouble if you go over there.
Right,
And so we can go to try to say that we're proving a point and we're going to explore because we're explorers, but it's like you're unnecessarily risking your crew.
right,
You know that we're at war with these people. Don't poke the bear. Let us, handle this, and
right,
then exploration will be opened up again.
right,
You know, I would love for them to do a show where that's what the show is about. It's like, okay, the Dominion War has been over now for, 10, 15, 20 years. We have finally got to a point where we've rebuilt the Federation enough and we've incorporated the various races from the Dominion enough into the Federation that we now want to go back to deep space exploration. And I mean, there's still a lot of the alpha and beta quadrants to explore, but you can't resist the temptation of flying through a wormhole and being 70,000 light years, away. So,
Right.
they send a ship or two, hey, you go left, you go right, and we'll, map this thing out and see what happens.
Right.
Um, I would love for them to do a show like that and just give us more of the gamma quadrant and the weirdness of the gamma quadrant, and that
Right.
and I think that's what I miss more than anything. I want it's all like the cruise, like kind of going back to the TNG model where all of the issues are external once again, and then them come up with just the most bizarre alien stuff to deal with. Not all the political dramas and we've happened upon this warring faction or whatever. No, give me a planet that I don't know turns to jelly every 4 days, or I mean, like just again, just off the wall stuff.
Sure.
Give me you know, the origin of the crystalline entity. We never see that. These
Yep.
random things popped up and they were cool, they were interesting, and then it was just like it was over. They blew up one and we never got to see him again.
Or
Like,
like that space whale looking thing from episode one of
yeah, yeah,
TNG
like
or whatever.
let's find out where they're from.
Yeah.
Like all of those things. Like there's so many like and not just to say like I want to do a rehashing of aliens that they introduced whenever, but I'm just saying give me that we are truly encountering weird,
Unique.
unusual, highly unique stuff. Right.
Right.
Maybe they meet like we did the mirror universe episodes, right? But maybe they're traveling and they come up across themselves, but not from a mirror universe, but like I don't know, from the opposite end. It's like you don't know it, but at one point you went through another mini wormhole, and here we are. We're you 60 years in the future, you know, or something like that.
Right.
Just anything different than what we've seen, and just get away from um, anything that's been done before. Is what I'm looking for, you know. And like the crystalline entity one just stands out right now in my head. Like instead of them coming from a planet, maybe there's just like an area of space where there's this giant crystalline mass that like a giant iceberg in space that's sentient and it breaks off pieces of itself every so often and sends them out into the void. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. It'd be curious to seeing as how the Alpha Quadrant was supposedly seeded by whatever that race was that Picard found in that one episode.
The
What
yeah, the original people or whatever they were.
Yeah, like how does the Gamma Quadrant different, or maybe the same? Maybe they also seeded the Gamma Quadrant themselves as well. Um, but yeah,
I would, yeah, and that's the other thing too. There are so many times where we've come into contact with or found out about ancient civilizations, the Iconians, the um, there was another group. I'm trying to think of what they were called. Anyway, there were a couple of them. Like, what if they like their basis was in the Gamma Quadrant, and all the things we ever found of them in the Alpha Quadrant were like outposts and stuff. The Takan, that's the other one, the Takan Empire, and like that episode of Next Generation, The Last Outpost, that was a Takan outpost. Okay, well, where was the original Takan planet? You
right.
know, and maybe we could find them somewhere, and they're still at war.
Yeah,
Something
right. Speaking of still at war, the Kai,
on that
we
planet.
yeah we lose her on that one planet, and that's in this first season, right? Like that's
It
so
is in the
early
first
on.
season. Yeah, she dies, or yeah, dies. Um, in the early, yeah, like it's towards the end of the first season, but it is the first season.
Right.
And in Star Trek Online, that is resolved though.
Mm,
She is eventually able to bring the Null Ennis people to peace, and they go back and remove the nanites and all that stuff that was keeping them from being able to die or to leave. And they
Right.
establish a settlement and all that stuff. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so that's all, at least according to Star Trek Online. Now, again, if you want to think of any of that as canon or not, that's on you. But yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, I have to say,
I
I
think that's
think,
it.
yeah, there really isn't anything else I can think of in this
No,
episode. But, yeah,
but
it's just. Go ahead. Go ahead.
are there any? Is there anything about this episode now that you've done your own official rewatch that just really gets to you? Like, is this like every time you see it, you're like, yeah, that's still it. That's the powerful moment. That's the one I could watch this over and over and over again. This was apex filming.
Yeah, yeah. Again, Major Kira is just a standout from the get go. Nana Visitor does a great job of playing this character, and I honestly feel like, in some ways, she's not allowed to shine like she does in this episode. Frankly, like she doesn't have authority like she has in this episode. Um, I mean, she bluffed her way. She commanded the station through that Cardassian standoff, and never again is she given quite that same role. And so it's interesting how she was able to do that here. Um, Odo comes off as very rugged, very uh, obtuse. He is when Cisco fires that warning shot at him, he says, "Who the hell is that?" He's very gruff, very he's got a lot of like he pretty tones down a lot, I guess, in
Hmm.
some ways. Like, it makes sense that he would be kind of more gruff because he just came off of the Cardassians running things, and he was the constable even back then. Um, Quark, we've already talked about him and the makeup. Um, Again, I feel the idea that Jadzia and Bashir, where their characters go, is interesting compared to this first episode, because I don't feel like Jadzia is more fully like she's already herself from the get go, and that was maybe her
Okay,
problem as the character.
that reminds me. That reminds me. Hot take.
Okay.
Maybe not one that everybody's going to agree with or whatever. Um, I've always thought Cisco should have ended up with Jadzia. Throw that out there. Just gonna say.
Okay. All right.
Uh, my reasons for that are that it's very clear that they know and understand each other very well. Um, their relationship obviously was quite strong, but also the few scenes that we have where Cisco and Jadzia are working together, having to talk to each other, do things with each other, are great. Their chemistry is great. It's I don't know. There's something about them, and we've talked about this with Avery Brooks before. When he gets into these kind of one-on-ones with people, he does a great job. We've talked about, like, for example, him and Odo. When those two were working together, it was also, great chemistry. The way they kind of set things up for each other to knock down, it's great. And I don't want to just 100% credit, just Avery Brooks for all that, because Renee's a great actor, Terry's a great actor. But I think there's something about those particular combos that just works. And considering that we didn't get a lot of Jadzia, I really feel like the more she worked with Avery, the better off um, that
She
particular character development of Dax and Cisco would have been.
right.
And we see her change a lot. Like, becomes more comfortable with herself, with her environment. She's very expressive. She is kind of a wild child to a bit, yeah, to a certain degree. And Cisco has a way of leveling her out that no one else does. Not even when Worf comes along. Like Worf almost seems to amplify that for her. She tends to directly try to do more and more wild things to antagonize Worf, to push him,
Right.
that she would never be able to get away with Cisco. Whereas she can still be her own person with Cisco, but she's not going to get away with some of the things that she got away with Worf or some of the other people that were interested in her. Like, she walks all over Julian, and that's why that one would also never work,
Right.
you know. But yeah, I always felt like Cisco had just the right amount of a balanced temperament with with his own playfulness, because Cisco can be kind of rueful at times. And I always felt like there was just enough there that if they had wanted to, they could have made a great, interesting couple, but
It
they
would
didn't
have
go
just
that
been
route.
too weird for me. I think the idea that he would have known Jadzia or known Dax, I should say, as a mentor, and then to marry the mentor. I mean, it feels like it's a kind of an inverted problem of the what's that episode called where you're not allowed to meet your old romantic partners,
Oh,
um,
rejoined.
rejoin. You're not allowed to
But
do that.
it's supposed to be that you're not supposed to reassociate with members of your past life. You're supposed to move on, which she already breaks by coming
Yes.
to station
Well,
in the
I was
first
that's
place.
that's what I'm saying is like it's
Yeah.
already broken on one level. They'd be breaking it even further, like an inverse version of the rejoined whole point of that. Is so anyway. I'm not. I totally understand what you're saying. Like maybe it would have worked, um, but I don't know. I'm not as into that pairing as you are. I'll put it that
Well, I'm
way.
not saying I'm not over here writing fan fiction about it or anything. I'm just saying that to me, especially considering the characters, the way they're introduced and everything like that, they made more sense. It took a lot of work for them to get the level of comfortability with Cassidy that we already had built in with Jadzia, and then they still dropped the ball with Cassidy. We didn't get enough that it really made it make sense. We could see the initial attraction, sure,
Right.
but we didn't get enough to feel like there was a legitimate connection there. And by the time they were getting to a point of establishing it, we're already in the seventh season. Whereas
Right.
we had this with Jadzia all along. Now,
Right.
obviously, and I think, you know, had that been the case, and they'd gone that route and explored this relationship between Jadzia and them, they probably never would have gotten rid of Terry and done the Esri thing, and we never would have had that Esri and Worf debacle and the Esri and
Bashir
Bashir
debacle.
debacle, and yeah,
Yeah.
but but because it would have given her more to do, and I mean that was part of the reason that Terry Farrell was asking to be dropped from main cast to recurring because she wasn't being utilized that much. She wanted to get out and do other things with her career, which makes sense, and
Right.
so yeah, but it is what it is at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will be it for us on this episode. We will have to definitely work on reining ourselves in a little bit. I don't
Oh,
want to.
at this point, come on now, reining
Well,
ourselves in.
I don't want to overtax the instrument, as they say.
Yeah.
But no, just to kind of keep things a little bit more uniform. But whatever. In these final moments, I will say that for the shows going forward, um, I've been trying to deal with this issue of getting things out on the various podcasting platforms. I don't understand the nature of the problem, to be completely honest. There seems to be some kind of security algorithm hiccup, and I think part of it is because our original hosting platform is actually based in another country. So there's some kind of exchange there that I don't understand yet.
Mm,
So trying to work through that. But if you want, you can always listen to the episodes that we do have that are out and available on the various podcasting platforms. And then, of course, everything else is here on YouTube as well. So you can always go there and listen if you don't want to watch stuff like that. Next week, we will be doing our coverage of certain parts of this book. In reading this book, I've recognized there's no way we're going to be able to get through all of
23
these.
chapters. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're so interesting, and there's so many things about them. So I think that what David, while I got you right now, what we should do is probably pick like maybe you pick your three favorites. I'll pick my three favorites,
We
and
have to
then
also hate on that one chapter
well,
that's just
yeah,
the worst.
the one we're gonna love to hate on. So there's
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Ugh.
But then we'll go from there, and we'll put together an episode where we just dedicate a few minutes to each one so that we can get through, because there's just, again, there's a lot here. I will tell you this though, if you have not picked this up and you're a fan of The Expanse, you are doing yourself a supreme disservice. This book is great. I can't tell you how many times I have been reading parts and been like, yeah, man, like this, it makes total sense. I love comparing it to the show. And then
Yeah,
of course there's the real world connotations as well. Like,
yeah,
because that's what I love about sci-fi in general, being able to take the show and compare it to stuff that's going on right now.
yeah,
This really helps out with that. So
yeah. It does
um
that very explicitly at very certain
yeah,
points. It does a great job
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah,
especially
I
with
think
the,
it's chapter 11 that I'm going to go ahead and say. So I think it was the one about nationalism versus patriotism.
which we started talking about early on in this episode. Yes.
Yeah, that one, like everything the author was saying, I was like, yes, 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 that's correct. That's awesome. I wouldn't have thought of that. You're totally right.
And
At the very
I'm
end, I
gonna,
had one disagreement with his conclusion, but well, I can talk about that
yeah,
when we get to it.
and we will.
Uh,
And I would just say the same thing, like, because you told me about it, you sent me the text message, and so I went immediately and skipped ahead and started reading it, and I was doing the same thing. I was like, spot on. I agree,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
100%. And I mean,
yeah,
that's how I felt about a lot of stuff in chapter 5 as well. It's like, this makes sense. This, yes, I agree here.
yeah.
I got this. So go get it. If you've watched The Expanse, if you enjoyed the show as much as we did, go get the book. It's available on Amazon. You can have it in a day and just take your time with it. And when you
Right,
find parts that remind you of episodes of the show, what I've done is when I find those parts, I go and watch that part of the show. It just really helps me out.
yeah.
So you can do it that way. You don't have to,
It
but
is on Amazon. I thought we were worried it disappeared off of Amazon.
it is still on Amazon. So I don't know if it was like disappearing for like Amazon Europe or something. But last time
Yeah,
I checked, it was on Amazon. So we
gotcha.
can check real quick just to see if it's still there. 'Cause it's been a couple of days. So, but but I'm just saying, I didn't see anything that said, because normally on Amazon it'll say like expiring soon or something like that. But I didn't see that
Right,
um, the last time I checked. But it could very well not be there, because sometimes I never saw the announcement when they said they were taking it off. I didn't see it on Amazon. I saw it on other sites
right.
saying it was coming off, but I never got like anything on Amazon that said, yes, this show will be removed effective yada yada
Blah blah
date.
blah. Yeah,
So yeah, I would go and check that out just to see. I don't know why they would take it off. It's their show.
right.
So, you're getting your views
Well, I
no
was
matter
just
what.
watching something today that Westworld was an HBO show and it's not on HBO anymore. Like, what the heck? So they'll do it apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
Well, I'm checking right now. I'm on Amazon right now, just so that you can see. And according to what I'm seeing, it's still there.
Boom.
Here's episode 1. Everything's available. There's no, thing that says that you got to pay for it. None of that. It's just
Good.
available to watch.
Good.
So as of right now, it's there. There you
Gotcha.
go. Anything
Well,
else you want to
that's
say?
another show worth going back and rewatching the first episode of.
Well, now that we've officially finished the books,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
maybe that's what we should do after we finish reading this
Mhm,
one, like reading it entirely. Maybe
mhm.
we should check that out.
And by the way, we plan on doing the Star Trek book as well. I think we've mentioned that probably, but the Star
Couple of
Trek and
times,
philosophy. Yeah,
yes.
we'll get to that one too.
So,
The Blackwell philosophy series is the
and
series.
there are
So
a lot of these. There's a lot of. In fact, I just saw
any
one.
just about any pop culture thing you can think of, they have a book
Yeah,
that
I
they
just saw
did.
one that was Lord of the Rings. So, like, I
Yeah,
logged into Amazon, it popped up right away.
and Perry,
Recommended.
I'm gonna tell you, I think that's partly why some of the like that one chapter you and I hate in the Expanse book. I wonder if they didn't say to some people out there, "Hey, we need people to write chapters for our book." And these people hadn't actually watched the show; they just binged some things real fast, and then were like, "Here's a chapter I wrote," and you're like, "You weren't a fan. You shouldn't have written this. What were you
Yeah,
doing?"
you and it's not even that you necessarily have to be a fan, but you definitely have to have had to watch the show before
Yes,
you can write anything, especially anything that's going to be a philosophical take on a
right,
show. You should at least watch the whole show
right.
before you make any kind of philosophical commentary. I will stand by it, and I'll say it now, and we'll talk about it when we get there, of course. I feel like that person less had an axe to grind with the characters you talked about, and more had an axe to grind with the philosopher they targeted
Yes.
in their breakdown. So
Philosophers,
yes,
multiple.
so but we'll get there
Yeah.
when we come back next week.
Yeah.
So until then, guys, we'll see you again, and yeah, take care of yourselves.
All right. Thanks, guys.